Hey guys, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, thanks. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a chilling new story when it drops. I always liked the sound of snow, soft, secretive, like the world whispering under its breath. But that night, out there in the Rockies, the sound wasn't soft, it was deliberate. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. I sat frozen in my tent, lantern light flickering over the nylon walls, rifle balanced across my knees. The storm had rolled in fast, dragging a tail of dry snow that hissed against the canvas. I could barely hear my own breathing over the wind, but that other sound, steady, slow footsteps, cut through everything. It moved in a wide circle just beyond the edge of the lantern's glow. Every few seconds I'd catch the faintest scrape of snow on fur, or maybe bone. I told myself it was a deer, maybe an elk nosing around. But deer don't walk on two legs, and elk don't stop every few paces to breathe like they're thinking. The light trembled on the tent fabric. My hand tightened on the rifle. My mind was trying its best to act casual, like, sure, totally normal, man, just nature doing its thing. But my gut said otherwise. It was the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for you to mess up. Then the smell hit, something coppery and old, like meat thawed too long. I tried to steady my breath, but each inhale made my stomach tighten. The wind dropped for half a heartbeat, and I heard the crunch again, this time closer, right outside the tent. "Go on," I whispered, voice cracking a little. "Keep walking, buddy. No autographs tonight." The crunch stopped. I could feel it, something just standing there, a breath away from the fabric. My heart was doing an entire drum solo in my chest. I raised the rifle and aimed at the dark shape pressing faintly through the tent wall. My finger slid onto the trigger. The storm wailed again, like the mountains were warning me not to. I fired. The blast cracked the air, the recoil slamming my shoulder back. The lantern jumped, shadows flailing across the walls. For a moment there was only the ringing in my ears. Then, nothing. No footsteps running off. No sound at all. Just the slow settling of snow. I sat there shaking, ears ringing, staring at the tent wall where the shape had been. The lantern flame trembled but held on. Outside the wind began again, slower now, almost lazy, as if amused. I swallowed, the adrenaline burning down into a cold pit in my stomach. "Great shot, hero," I muttered. "Hope you scared away that vicious snowbank." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there was listening. I unzipped the tent flap and peeked out. The night was pale, ghostly. My breath fogged instantly. The snow reflected the lantern's orange light, turning the clearing into a shallow bowl of color surrounded by black timber. My footprints were there, my supplies, the fire pit. And 20 feet away, a line of new prints circled my camp, deep, too far apart to be human, and too long to belong to any deer I'd ever seen. The wind shifted, carrying a sound low and distant, something halfway between a moan and a sigh. It wasn't loud, but it filled the woods like it belonged to them. I pulled the rifle tighter and ducked back into the tent, heart hammering. Whatever was out there, I'd crossed paths with it once already. I just didn't know yet that it was only the beginning. Outside, the snow started to fall harder, covering the strange prints as if the mountain didn't want me to see what was walking in my circle. 2 days earlier, the Rockies had looked almost friendly. Big white caps dusted like powdered sugar, trees wearing their first light coats of snow. Early winter, that sweet spot before the world decides it's trying to kill you. The kind of season that makes you believe nature still likes you. I'd driven up from Colorado Springs with the back of my truck packed like a catalog spread. Tent, stove, sleeping bag rated to -20, 2 weeks' worth of food, and an optimism that could have heated its own campfire. I wanted quiet. No phones, no people, no traffic. Just me and the mountains doing that silent handshake we'd done for years. The road turned to gravel halfway up Hollow Peak. A sign half buried in frost read, "No winter servicing beyond this point." I laughed, patted the steering wheel. "That's fine, pal. I can service myself." At the last turnout, I parked, shouldered my pack, and hiked in. The snow was ankle-deep, more sugar than powder, and the air smelled of pine sap and cold stone. My breath fogged in quick bursts. Somewhere a raven croaked like an old door hinge. I felt that familiar peace slide in, the kind that city folks try to buy in bottled water and podcasts. By mid-afternoon, I'd found my spot, a clearing with a frozen stream cutting through, ringed by spruce. I set up the tent, chopped wood, and congratulated myself out loud. All right, genius, look at you, modern-day frontiersman. The echo sounded less impressed. When the sun started to dip, I caught movement down near the tree line, a flash of tan. For a second I thought elk, but the stillness afterward made my neck prickle. I told myself it was a shadow trick. Early winter light does that, bends around corners like it's got secrets. Next morning I followed a set of prints that weren't mine. Hoofed, sure, but oddly close together, like whatever made them had been pacing in circles. The tracks led to a small clearing, and that's where I found them. A dozen deer, maybe more, laid out in a perfect ring, each body stiff, each neck stretched as though arranged. I crouched, the crunch of my boots loud in the quiet. The air was iron-sharp, thick with the smell of frozen blood, and every carcass had one thing in common: no tongues. I tried logic. Wolves, maybe mountain lions. Predators sometimes chew tongues first for the salt, right? But even as I said it aloud, my voice felt small. The cuts were clean, deliberate, surgical. I should have turned back then. Any reasonable man would have. But I'd come all this way for peace and solitude, and leaving because of some macabre wildlife scene felt dramatic. Besides, if I ran every time the woods tried to freak me out, I'd never leave the couch. That night after dinner, I sat by the fire writing in my journal, hands cupped around a mug of cocoa that tasted faintly of aluminum. The stars were sharp enough to cut paper. I told myself I'd hike farther south tomorrow, find another camp, somewhere less crime scene adjacent. Still, as the flames hissed and popped, my eyes kept flicking toward the trees. Every so often I thought I saw movement, just past where the firelight died, tall shapes gliding between trunks. I told myself it was the heat waves playing tricks. Around midnight, a flake of snow drifted onto my journal page, then another. A slow, polite beginning to what would become something else entirely. I zipped up the tent and crawled inside. I fell asleep listening to the hush of new snow landing on canvas, unaware that by the time I woke, the mountains would have changed their mind about letting me stay. Morning came with that thin metallic light you only get at the start of winter, sun trying to be friendly but not committing. My tent had a skin of frost, the kind that crackles when you touch it. Coffee steam curled from my cup, and for a while everything felt simple: breath, warmth, caffeine. I let myself believe the deer ring had been a bad dream that smelled like pennies. It wasn't. I took my rifle, followed my own tracks, and the world quieted down to the soft grind of boots on crust. The pines leaned together as if they'd had a meeting and decided to keep their opinions to themselves. I reached the little clearing, and there it was again, exactly where it shouldn't have been. 12 deer laid out in a circle, hooves pointing inward, chests rimed with frost like sugared fruit at a fancy hotel. The snow had dusted them in the night, softening edges, but you can't frost over intent. I set the rifle against a stump and crouched. My breath drifted across a doe's glassy eye and fogged it a moment. The wound at her mouth was neat, almost polite. No ragged tearing, no predator's impatience, just intentional. Every tongue gone, as if collected for an inventory I did not want to see. Wolves, I said, because the human brain loves a category. The fact is, predators rarely arrange their meals like a church display. The fact is, nothing about this ring said messy hunger. It said ritual. I stood and paced the perimeter, counting steps. The ring was almost perfect, about 30 feet across, bodies spaced with a care that made my skin feel one size too small. There were prints, but the snowfall had softened them into suggestions, long depressions, oddly narrow, set far apart, as if a tall thing had walked with too much grace for its size. Near the far edge, a spruce limb hung low and heavy with white. I brushed it aside and found something dark stamped into the trunk beneath the bark. A gouge, long and vertical, the wood around it polished like it had been touched often, at shoulder height for me. Higher, if you imagined whatever did it wasn't kneeling. A breeze moved the needles, and loose snow sifted down my collar. I shivered and added, I admire the commitment, really. 10 out of 10 for presentation. The smell out there wasn't just blood. Under it was a sour mineral chill like the inside of a freezer that's been unplugged too long. It made my nose prickle and my eyes water. I wiped at them and told myself the cold was playing games. On the way back to camp, I noticed other things you only see when you've already seen too much. A squirrel's tracks that ended at the base of a tree with no upward marks. A patch of snow where something had lain down and melted a man-shaped hollow. Sap frozen mid-drip in a bead that caught the light like a blue eye. Breakfast was jerky and stubborn eggs that refused to cook evenly on the little stove. I ate with my gloves off so the cold could keep me honest. The fire I built afterward was small and neat, and I found myself feeding it like it was a nervous animal. Steady, careful, not letting it get thin. The smoke rose straight for a minute, then leaned toward the north as if pointing. That's when I started making rules. The kind you don't write on paper because you don't want to admit you need them. Rule 1. Do not leave camp near dusk. Rule 2. Keep the fire fat and loud. Rule 3. If you see anything that looks deliberate in the snow, treat it like it's for you. Not official wilderness regulations, sure, but the mountains have their own handbook and they don't hand out copies. You learn by doing and sometimes by not living. Around noon, I took a slow walk to collect more wood. The sky had turned that pale sheet metal gray. The forest looked clean, undone, reset. I told myself that's what this place was. A reset button for a man who'd been feeling the city gnaw at him. The deer, an anomaly. A story to tell later over a beer. I polished that lie until it almost shone. Halfway back with a load of kindling, I heard it. A faint rhythmic crunch, far off and patient. Not a scurry, not the erratic stamp of something four-legged. This was a measured metronome, like someone keeping time with their boots. It paused when I paused. It went on when I went on. Great, I said, heart trying to climb my throat. Got myself a stalker. I didn't run. Running in snow is a fine way to meet the ground with your teeth. I walked steady, like a man who had places to be and nothing to fear. The crunch shadowed me until I stepped back into the clearing of my camp and the fire gave a throaty pop. Then it stopped, as if whoever was out there had reached a line it wouldn't cross. I set the wood down, fed the flames, let the heat lick my cheeks. I looked out at the dark tree line and felt something look back. The line was real, fire on one side, the rest of the mountain on the other. Rule 4, whatever fears the flame is not on your team. I kept the fire up until evening and ate like a man arguing with his own nerves. Spoon to mouth, swallow, repeat. When the first few flakes started to fall again, soft as ash, I told myself, tomorrow I'll move south, find a new site, put some distance between me and the circle with the missing tongues. A good plan, I thought. A solid plan. The mountain, of course, had already made other arrangements. By dawn, the world looked like it had been cleaned and repainted. Snow smooth as porcelain, the trees frosted in faint glitter, the air sharp enough to make you feel like you'd been polished from the inside. A blue jay scolded something unseen, and I took that as a good omen. Jays don't waste their breath unless they've got an audience. I packed up camp slow the way I always did. Fold, stack, check. Routine keeps you sane. I decided to head south, back toward a trailhead I'd marked on my map. Nothing dramatic, just a polite retreat before the forest decided to get creative again. The morning's peace lasted all of 20 minutes. That's when I saw the tracks. They came out of the trees from the north, deep and wide apart, one after another like punctuation marks left by a very tall sentence. The snow there was new. No wind had crusted it yet, so every print looked fresh, edges crisp, each step sinking twice as deep as mine. I crouched, gloved fingers tracing the rim of one impression. No claws, no clear hoof split either. The weight had melted a smooth hollow, as if something hard and narrow had pressed through the crust instead of a foot or paw. For scale, I laid my knife across it. The print was longer than the blade. Okay, I said to no one. Either Paul Bunyan took up moonwalking or I've got company. Humor's a strange thing. It's like a reflex you use to tell your brain you're still in charge. I'd been in tight corners before, storms, bears, One time an avalanche that decided I looked like a good candidate for burial practice. But this felt different. Predators leave chaos. This felt planned, meticulous. The tracks circled my sight once, just once, and then vanished back into the woods the way they came. No meandering, no confusion, just a neat, decisive loop, like a surveyor checking his perimeter. I followed them for a few yards, careful not to breathe too loud. The forest was still, except for the whisper of snow falling from overloaded branches. The prints threaded through the trees in a straight line that didn't care about terrain or scents. I swear some steps landed on rocks slick with ice, where nothing should have been able to get traction. I stopped at a stump where the prints ended abruptly. The snow beyond was smooth, unbroken, no sign of where the thing had gone. I looked up out of habit because sometimes the right answer is the worst one, and for a second I thought I saw something pale between two trunks. Antlers, big ones. Not the brown kind you hang on a wall, but chalk white, bone bright in the dim light. They glinted once, then slipped back behind a tree as gentle as a curtain closing. Every muscle in my body tensed at once. The rifle slid into my hands like muscle memory. I aimed where the shape had been, waited for it to show itself again. It didn't. The trees swayed, indifferent. "Must have been a branch," I whispered, though branches don't usually blink. That was the first time the name surfaced in my head, Wendigo. I'd heard the stories. Everyone who spends too much time in the wilderness hears them eventually. Spirits of hunger and cold. People who ate too much of the wrong thing and turned into something the forest wouldn't forgive. Old myths to keep travelers polite. I'd always thought of them the way you think about thunderstorms. Dangerous, sure, but not personal. I walked back to camp without looking over my shoulder because that's rule number 5 in any wild place. If you look back, you're inviting whatever's following to catch up. I heard more crunching in the snow behind me as I walked. Nope, fuck that. I was getting out of here right now. At camp, I packed faster. Coffee skipped at breakfast. My stomach said no thanks. By the time I shouldered my pack, snow was drifting heavier, little crystal blades slicing sideways through the trees. The sky had gone from pewter to charcoal in an hour. The mountains, generous as ever, were about to give me a weather tantrum. I started south, compass steady, boots biting the trail. The light dimmed faster than it should have, maybe clouds, maybe something else. The air thickened until each breath felt chewed. Then I heard it again, far off, faint, that same rhythmic crunch from yesterday. Not close, not yet, but steady as a heartbeat I couldn't claim as mine. I tightened my straps and said out loud, "Fine. You want to walk behind me? Go ahead. I'm not looking back. I've seen that movie. And the guy who looks back dies." The joke hung in the air, small and brittle. I kept moving. The crunch came with me, keeping time. And just as I started thinking the storm couldn't possibly get worse, the first flake the size of a coin landed on my glove, heavy, wet, the kind that means real snow is about to begin. Somewhere behind me, a branch snapped. That's when I knew. Whatever had made that circle of deer wasn't done with me yet. It was following me now. By the second night, the weather had settled into that tricky calm, the kind that makes you think the mountain's forgiven you. The snow had stopped falling, the trees held their breath, and the air was so still I could hear the tick of cooling metal from my camp stove. I'd found a new site a few miles south of where I'd seen the prints, a small rise above a half-frozen stream. From there I could see the slope roll downward into dark pines that went on forever. It wasn't exactly homey, but it had the virtue of visibility. Nothing sneaks up easy when you can see for 100 yards. Still, the silence had changed. I could feel something in the woods watching me, waiting to see what I'd do next. To pass the time, I started making inventory, partly out of habit, partly because counting things feels like control. 2 cans of chili, 3 packets of jerky, 1 coffee tin, 1 half loaf of bread, a small bottle of bourbon I'd promised myself for the last night. A man likes having something to look forward to. The fire popped, and I told it, "Don't you start acting up, too. I'm running low on reliable company." By morning, that list had gotten shorter. When I unzipped the tent, my first thought was wind. The snow around camp had shallow grooves cut through it, like fingers dragged through sand. My pack, which I'd left tied shut and hung on a stubby branch, lay on the ground with the strap snapped. A few pieces of jerky sat half buried nearby. My tin mug was gone entirely, like it had walked off to start a new life. I knelt, brushing snow away. No paw prints, no boot prints, nothing. Just those strange melted grooves, long and narrow, spaced apart like someone had raked the snow with bone tools. "Nice trick," I muttered. "You could have at least left the coffee." My laugh sounded hollow even to me. I spent the rest of the morning combing the perimeter, following the marks until they simply stopped at the edge of the frozen stream. The ice there looked wrong, too thin, like something heavy had walked across and the water hadn't had time to refreeze properly. I poked it with a stick and watched hairline cracks spiderweb outward. No sign of what had crossed. Back at camp, I rebuilt the fire higher than before. Firelight in daylight feels wasteful, but I didn't care. The warmth was proof the world still obeyed a few basic rules. By noon, the air had shifted again. It smelled of wet bark and iron. I'd set a couple of small snares farther down the slope, rabbit lines mostly, simple but reliable. I figured if something was stealing my food, I might as well restock. When I went to check them that afternoon, all three were torn apart, the cord shredded, the stakes pulled clean from the ground. In the snow nearby were those same faint depressions, too long for human, too deliberate for animal. That night, I decided to sleep light. The lantern stayed lit. The rifle rested across my lap. Every flicker of shadow got my full attention. Somewhere in the early hours, I heard the soft rustle of canvas. Not the wind, this was curiosity. A careful tug, then a pause, then another. I held my breath and stared at the tent wall where the sound came from. The fabric bowed slightly inwards, as though touched by something that wanted to understand what it was made of. My finger slid to the trigger. The shape withdrew, slow and polite. The quiet that followed felt heavy, padded, like a blanket laid over my ears. I stayed like that until dawn, eyes gritty, pulse humming. When I finally stepped outside, the fire was down to coals. My traps, my pack, even my boots, which I'd left by the entrance to dry, were gone. In their place sat something small and pale, a half-gnawed deer bone, clean and hollowed out, placed carefully beside my footprints. I stared at it for a long time. The bone was stripped of every shred of flesh. I nudged it with my rifle barrel and said, "Well, thanks for the trade. Hope you enjoy the footwear." My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. It was thinner, stretched. That afternoon, I rebuilt my fire again, higher, louder, a beacon against the silence pressing in from the trees. Every now and then I caught a flicker between trunks, something tall, pale, moving slow as breath, always just out of reach. I pretended not to notice. Pretending I was learning could get you through a lot. By the time night came, the sky had gone gray-white, the wind sharpening to a hiss. The lantern threw a warm circle over the snow, and I sat inside it like a man clinging to the last square of reality. That's when I said it aloud for the first time, just to test how it felt. Wendigo. The word lingered in the cold, then vanished into the trees. Something out there seemed to listen, and the wind suddenly began to change. The night after the bone offering, the thing in the woods decided to make introductions. The air had gone glassy again, that cold so pure it rings when you breathe. I sat by the fire with my rifle across my knees, my backup boots half melted from drying too close to the flames, pretending to read the map by lantern light, pretending I had anywhere left to go. The paper shivered each time the wind pushed at the tent flap, as though the mountain were breathing through the seams. A sound broke the hush, a soft drag like cloth sliding over bark. My first thought was wind. My second thought, uninvited, was fingertips. The fire hissed as a flake landed on it. Another. Within minutes, the world narrowed to a slow snowfall, thick and heavy, flakes spinning like lazy moths in the light. I told myself snow absorbed sound. That's why everything felt muted, why the crunch I'd grown used to was missing. Still, my pulse kept time with the sparks. Then the smell came again, metallic, damp, old, the same one from the first night. My tongue tasted it before my nose did. I swung the rifle up, pulse climbing into my throat. "You again?" I said too loud. You left a half-chewed bone last time. What? You want a 5-star review? The trees didn't answer, but the shadows shifted. At the far rim of the fire's reach, something long and pale moved between trunks. 2 legs, bent wrong at the knee, walking upright, but too slow, too thoughtful. The snow around it didn't crunch. It just parted, like the air made room. I tried to steady the barrel. The lantern hissed, guttered, flared again. In that flare I saw it clearly for the first time. The head of a deer skull, clean and white as moonlight, antlers branching so wide they brushed the low limbs. Blue light burned where eyes should be, not bright enough to dazzle, but sharp enough to etch itself behind my eyelids. It watched me. I don't mean in the way an animal looks at motion. This thing recognized me, like a man scanning a crowd, until he spots the one face he's been waiting for. The fire popped, the creature flinched, almost human, then tilted its head. A trick of the heat haze made the antlers seem to twitch, flex, grow. "Not tonight," I whispered. "Whatever this is, not tonight." The rifle kicked against my shoulder. The flash lit the clearing white for a heartbeat, and it was gone. No burst of snow, no body falling, just gone. My ears rang and the smell of gunpowder clawed at the cold. For a long minute, I didn't move. The fire was the only thing that made sense, its warmth licking my boots, its crackle reminding me the world still had rules. Then faintly, from somewhere just beyond the circle of light, came a sound that wasn't wind at all. A single exhale, low, rough, almost thoughtful. Like something tasting the air I'd just spoiled with smoke. I threw another log on the fire, then another, until the flames roared tall enough to paint the branches orange. "Stay back," I said, voice shaking. "I'm armed, caffeinated, and very bad company." Snow swirled at the edges of the glow, blurring the trees into gray smudges. The blue eyes flickered once more in the distance, 2 small lanterns in a sea of white, and then blinked out as if doused. I didn't sleep, not properly. I sat upright until dawn, muscles locked, watching shadows crawl around the tent. Every few hours the fire would sink, and I'd feed it again, muttering the same line under my breath. "Keep it burning, keep it burning." By sunrise, the storm clouds were stacking along the horizon. The wind had a new weight in it, a low hum like an engine far away. When I stepped outside, my footprints from the night before were half filled with snow, but the prints circling the camp were pristine, as though something had remade them while I watched the fire die. The snowing had stopped. Visibility was better. I had to get out now. I packed fast, fingers numb, and started down the trail toward the lower ridge. That was the plan anyway. The mountains, as I was learning, had a way of changing the itinerary mid-trip. I started down the ridge with quiet determination. The air bit at my nose and the sky had that flat, bruised look that says something big is coming. I told myself it was just weather I could handle. I'd seen worse. About half a mile in, I stopped to tighten my straps. The woods below looked calm, too calm. Snow hung motionless on branches. Even the wind had left, like an audience stepping out before the show turned ugly. Then the first gust hit. It came from nowhere. One second the air was still, the next it was roaring through the trees, ripping flakes loose like shredded paper. I staggered and pulled my scarf over my mouth, trying to keep breathing. Another gust, harder. I checked my compass. The needle spun once, hesitated, then steadied. South, easy enough. I took 3 steps. The wind flipped direction, hard north, slapping me sideways. The needle twitched again. "Really?" I yelled over the roar. "You can't even stick to one direction?" The words tore out of my mouth and vanished in the gale. Snow thickened into a white wall. I couldn't see 10 feet ahead. My headlamp was just a glowing bubble of useless light. Every breath filled my beard with frost. I tried to retrace my steps, but they'd already vanished, erased faster than I could make them. And through it all came a new sound, a slow crunch, crunch, like something pacing around me inside the storm. I turned full circle, rifle up. Nothing but blinding white. The crunch moved when I did, keeping perfect rhythm. I tried a quick sprint downslope, and the sound followed, closing the distance. "Stop it!" I shouted, half laughing, half begging. "Pick your own trail." A shadow slid across the storm, a darker patch against the white, It loomed tall, spindly, antlers catching stray snowflakes. The blue glow flickered once, twice, then vanished. The crunching stopped. A new sound replaced it, a deep, hollow thud, as though something large had knelt in the snow. I spun, heart punching through my ribs, finger on the trigger. Nothing. Then from somewhere close, a voice, talking directly into my head. A deep whisper that bypassed the ears and crawled straight behind the eyes. "Stay." I stumbled back. "What? Hell no!" The wind screamed louder, picking up shards of ice and hurling them like glass. I ducked behind a pine and dropped to one knee, shielding my face. When I looked up, the world was gone, just motion and colorless blur. The cold was alive now, creeping into my joints, my teeth. My gloves felt thin as tissue. I couldn't tell if the shaking was from fear or freezing, maybe both. My only hope was shelter. There was a shallow hollow nearby, half covered by an overhang of rock. I crawled for it, digging into the snow like an animal. The wind tried to drag me backward, clawing at my pack straps. I cursed, pulled harder. Inside the hollow it was quieter, but not safe. The wind still moaned through the cracks, and outside the snow swirled in wild spirals. I built a fire fast, matches shaking, wood damp but willing. The flame caught, small and desperate. Outside something brushed the rock, a heavy, deliberate drag, the sound of claws or fingers trailing along stone. I leaned close to the fire, letting the smoke sting my eyes. The dragging stopped. For a moment, nothing but my breathing. Then the low, steady crunch began again, circling the hollow. I clutched the rifle tighter, whispering to myself, "You've camped through worse. You just never brought home the company before." Minutes stretched. The fire crackled. The wind screamed, then fell silent so abruptly my ears rang with the absence. I risked a glance outside. The snow was a swirling gray curtain, and in it I caught a shape standing perfectly still, tall as two men, the deer skull faintly glowing through the storm. I blinked. It was gone. The silence pressed close again. The fire hissed once and spat a spark, and I swear the sound almost answered it, low and amused. The blizzard didn't stop that night. It stayed, roaring and circling, like the mountain itself had closed its hand around me and wasn't planning to let go. By the second day inside that hollow, the world had vanished beneath a blanket of white noise. The blizzard had dug in, roaring on and off like an animal breathing in its sleep. I'd seen winter tantrums before, but never one that stayed, never one that felt aimed at me. The first night, I kept the fire alive like a nervous habit, feeding it bit by bit from the woodpile I'd scavenged. By morning, half of it was gone, and so was most of my food. The jerky bag lay open, snow crusted over the edges. My stomach growled like a small, furious pet I couldn't calm down. I rationed what little I had left. 2 cans of chili, 1 stale biscuit, a handful of nuts, and a single chocolate bar I'd been saving for morale. That chocolate became sacred. I even gave it a name, Hershey the Hope Bar. I told it stories about warmer days and promised it a grand finale once the sun came back. Talking to food isn't a sign of madness, by the way. It's just a man keeping his mind from chewing itself. By day 3, visibility was still 0. My watch said noon, but the light outside was a dull bruise. I tried to hike a little ways out, see if I could spot a break in the weather. I got about 30 steps before the wind shoved me back. The snow had piled waist-deep in places. Every time I lifted a leg, the other sank. When I turned around, my trail was gone. Not even a suggestion of my own boot prints. Back in the hollow, I wrapped myself in the sleeping bag, rocking slightly to keep warm. My breath fogged the inside of my scarf, freezing in small crystals that scratched my lips. I'd stopped feeling my toes sometime yesterday. My fingers were swollen and pink, half numb. The hunger was louder now. It filled the silence like static, pressing behind my ribs. I tried to distract myself by carving into the handle of my hatchet. A little pattern, nothing fancy, just something to remind me I still had hands. Around dusk, the wind dropped again. The sudden quiet was worse than the noise. The fire sputtered low, a thin blue flame licking through the coals. I reached for another piece of wood, and that's when I smelled it, something new cutting through the cold. Meat, not canned, not processed, fresh. The scent crawled straight into my brain, warm and savory and wrong. My stomach twisted like it had been waiting for that smell. I crawled to the entrance of the hollow, peering out. The snow had slowed to a fine mist, swirling in slow spirals. There, just outside the edge of the overhang, lay a small pile of something dark. The shape was half buried in snow, but the smell told me everything I needed to know. Meat. My rational brain, the part that still pretended to run the show, started arguing immediately. It's bait. It's a trick. Don't touch it. The other part, the part hollowed out by hunger, said, eat first, question later. I stared into the storm, and for a split second I saw them again. 2 burning blue points just beyond the veil of snow. The antlers shifted, catching what little light there was. It stood motionless, watching, waiting. The smell thickened, almost choking. I stepped forward, just enough for the scent to hit stronger. The pile was small, maybe a pound or 2 of meat, reddish-brown, curled at the edges with frost. I whispered, "You're losing it, man. Don't do it." But my body had already decided. I lunged forward, grabbed a chunk, and shoved it into my mouth before my mind could stop me. It was raw, icy, metallic. It slid down like a stone wrapped in fire. The taste hit me like electricity, horrible and divine. Every cell in my body screamed yes and no at once. I dropped to my knees, panting. The blue lights flickered again through the snow, closer now. "Enjoying the show?" I rasped. They blinked once, slowly. Then they vanished. I crawled back into the hollow, wiped my mouth with a shaking hand, and curled up by the fire. Sleep came in fits. My stomach gurgled and twisted, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was energy, strength. I felt alive in the strangest, most terrible way. The storm outside kept on raging, but for the first time since it began, I didn't feel afraid of it. Somewhere deep inside me, a new kind of warmth had started to grow, and the mountain, quiet for now, seemed to approve. I woke to silence. Not the gentle kind, but the heavy, smothering sort that feels like the world is holding its breath. The blizzard had finally stopped. For a few blissful seconds, I thought I dreamed the whole thing, the meat, the eyes, the voice in the snow. Then my stomach growled, deep and long, like an echo from something living inside me. My tongue brushed against my teeth and found a copper taste. I stumbled out of the hollow into a landscape remade. The storm had sculpted the world smooth and white, erasing everything that came before. My camp looked buried beneath waves of snow, only the black mouth of my fire pit still visible, smoking faintly. The air was still as glass. Even the trees looked stunned. And lying there, right at the mouth of the hollow, was another pile of meat. It was bigger this time, fresh, red, rimed with frost that hadn't had time to melt. The smell hit me like a door kicked open. My breath came faster. I wanted to turn away to prove I was still running the show, but something deep under my skin pulsed like a second heartbeat. My body was already moving toward it before my brain could vote. The memory of the blue eyes flashed through my mind. That tall, bone-white figure watching from the storm, the way it had just waited after I ate the first time, like a teacher testing a student's first answer. "Not hungry," I muttered, voice hoarse. "Not anymore." My stomach disagreed violently. It cramped hard enough to make me hunch over. My breath came out in sharp, visible bursts. It was cold, brutally cold, but under that chill, I felt heat gathering. Small, dark sparks of it rolling up through my veins like something waking. My fingertips burned against the air. I laughed, half mad, half terrified. "Well, that's new." The wind whispered through the trees, slow and deliberate, as if waiting for me to make a choice. I crouched near the meat. It steamed faintly in the cold. Animal? Human? I couldn't tell anymore, and the part of me that should have cared was too tired to argue. The first bite was easier this time. The cold flesh stuck to my teeth, but it melted on my tongue with an iron sweetness that made my head spin. My body responded instantly, warmth blooming in my chest, spreading to my arms and legs, banishing the numbness that had crept into me for days. By the time I realized what I was doing, the pile was gone. I wiped my mouth, shaking, staring at the empty patch of snow. "God help me," I whispered. "I don't even care what that was." The woods stayed silent. That night, I didn't build a fire. I didn't need to. The warmth in me held steady, humming beneath the skin like a quiet motor. I sat outside the hollow, eyes adjusting easily to the dim light. The moon slipped through torn clouds, silver and sharp, and for the first time I saw the forest clearly. The outlines of branches miles away, the faint shapes of animals moving under trees. My breath no longer fogged. When the wind picked up again, it carried a faint sound with it, something between a groan and a word. "Join me." The voice wasn't cruel, it sounded inviting, familiar. I shook my head. "I'm good, thanks. Already joined enough things in life, gym memberships, bad credit plans." The sound rolled through the trees, not angry but patient. When I finally crawled into my tent, sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the blizzard, those antlers rising above the snow, the glint of blue eyes cutting through the white. And beneath it all, I felt something turning over inside me, slow and steady, like an engine starting in a frozen car. By morning, I felt fine, better than fine. I tore down camp, hands steady and strong. My body felt lighter, sharper. The cold didn't sting anymore. The hunger was gone, replaced by a strange, clean hunger for movement. When I slung my pack on and started toward the slope, I barely noticed the way my footprints pressed twice as deep as before, or that, for the first time in days, I couldn't see my own breath. All I knew was the blizzard had passed, and I had survived it. By the time I broke camp, the storm had turned into a memory. Thin clouds drifting apart, sunlight spilling down the slopes like gold dust. The Rockies had washed their face clean. I should have been exhausted, but I wasn't. Every step felt effortless, my boots punching deep prints into snow that didn't seem to slow me at all. My pack should have weighed 40 pounds, yet it swung light against my shoulders as if gravity had decided to give me a break. The cold didn't bother me either. I'd left my gloves off to feel the air. It was maybe 15 degrees, but my fingers felt only a pleasant sting, the kind you get from cold creek water on a hot day. "Guess I'm built different," I said, laughing to no one. The sound carried clear through the trees. The trail looked the same, but I noticed things I'd never seen before. Tiny fractures in the ice on tree bark, the shimmer of moisture frozen mid-drip, even a hare crouched 50 yards away, heart hammering so loud I swore I could hear it. When it darted off, I tracked it with perfect clarity, every bounce and twist. My eyes felt like cameras set to a higher frame rate. By midday, I found the frozen stream that wound back toward the road. The surface glimmered under a dusting of powder, cracked here and there. I walked along the bank, humming, half drunk on energy. I didn't even realize I was humming until I stopped and felt the echo still hanging in my chest. I crouched, scooped a handful of snow and pressed it to my lips. It melted instantly, sliding down my throat in a rush of cold that made me sigh. My reflection in the ice below blinked up at me. My face looked leaner, sharper. My eyes, well, maybe it was the light, but they looked brighter. "Mountain glow up," I joked, "better than any spa." By evening the trees thinned. A strip of asphalt shimmered far below, the logging road I'd taken in, civilization in black and gray. I'd never been happier to see a sign of human meddling. When I finally reached the truck, I half expected it to be gone, swallowed by snow or curiosity. But there it was, half buried, patient as a dog that knows you'll come back eventually. I brushed snow from the windshield, climbed in and turned the key. The engine coughed once and started. The radio came alive with static, then a voice reading local updates. Light snowfall expected through Wednesday. Minor power outages reported. The normalcy of it hit harder than the cold. I was back in the world of traffic lights and grocery lists. Driving down the mountain felt like returning from another planet. Each curve brought a little more color to the world. Brown grass, green pines, the blue of the sky sharpening by the minute. I caught myself grinning for no reason. My hands on the wheel didn't even shake. When I hit town, I parked outside my cabin and stepped out, stretching. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and someone grilling. My stomach rumbled, deep and eager. Inside, I showered until the water went cold, then collapsed onto the couch. The warmth of the house didn't feel different from the warmth inside me. My phone buzzed, friends checking in. "You back from the wilderness yet?" one text read. "You alive or did the Bears win?" I typed back, "Alive, Bears forfeited." They invited me to dinner the next night. I said yes before I could think twice. It felt good to be human again, to have people waiting somewhere warm. As night fell, I caught my reflection in the dark window across the room. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw something else looking back. Taller, broader, with eyes faintly glinting blue. I blinked and it was gone. Probably exhaustion, probably bad lighting. Still, I left the window curtains closed before bed, just in case. When I lay down, sleep came fast. I dreamed of snowfields stretching forever, of antlers rising like trees, and of a voice whispering from somewhere deep inside me.
You survived because I chose you.
I woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, not from fear but hunger. A hunger no breakfast could touch, no matter how much I ate. That evening I drove into town for dinner like nothing strange had ever happened. My friends picked the usual spot, a roadside diner with steamed windows and the kind of neon sign that buzzed louder than the conversation inside. The open flickered just enough to make you wonder if it meant it. They waved when I walked in. "Hey, mountain man, survived your hermit trip?" "Barely," I said, sliding into the booth. "Got lost in that crazy snowstorm." The waitress brought menus, but I already knew what I wanted. Meat, something bleeding. I ordered the house special, ribeye, rare. When she asked if I wanted the salad that came with it, I almost laughed. "Just the steak," I said. "Skip the leaves." They teased me about it. What happened to the guy who used to brag about his kale smoothies? "Retired," I said. "Turns out you don't need greens when you have adrenaline." It got laughs, normal laughs. That's what threw me off, how normal everything felt. The clatter of plates, the smell of coffee, the dull hum of conversation. For the first time since the mountain, I thought maybe I'd left it all up there. The fear, the hunger, the thing in the blizzard. Then the food came. The steak hit the table, still sizzling, the smell curling through my chest like smoke through dry wood. I picked up the knife, but my hand hesitated. Every fiber in my body was screaming, "Don't cook it." I pressed the edge into the meat and the juices bled out, red and hot. The first bite was heaven. Every chew filled my veins with warmth. I barely swallowed before cutting another piece, then another. My friends were still chatting, but I couldn't hear them anymore, just the sound of my teeth tearing through flesh. When I finally looked up, they were staring. "Man," one said slowly, "you're eating like you haven't seen food in weeks." I laughed it off, mouth half full. Guess I missed home cooking. No matter how much I ate, the hunger didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened. The more I chewed, the emptier I felt. The steak vanished, then the potatoes, then the bread I hadn't even ordered. I wiped the plate clean like a starving man and still felt hollow. "You okay?" my friend asked. I nodded, forcing a smile. Just a healthy appetite. But I could smell something else. Blood. Not from the food, from them. It pulsed beneath their skin, rich and hot, louder than the chatter of the diner. My eyes tracked the throbbing vein in my friend's neck as he laughed, and for a terrifying second I imagined leaning across the table and sinking my teeth in. I blinked hard and looked away, fingers gripping the fork until it bent. Outside, the wind rattled the diner windows, and for an instant, the glass reflected something wrong. Not me. Not exactly. Taller, thinner, eyes faintly glowing blue. I blinked, and the reflection was normal again. When we left, the cold night air hit me like a drug. I could smell everything: grease, exhaust, the faint iron tang of someone's paper cut at the next table. My friend said goodbye, laughing, oblivious, and I waved like everything was fine. It wasn't. That night I woke in my bed, breath shallow, stomach clawing at itself. I stumbled into the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and froze. My reflection was pale, eyes rimmed faintly in blue light. My lips were cracked and dry, stained red. When I looked down, there was blood under my nails, fresh, sticky. I staggered back, heart pounding. The taste on my tongue wasn't just meat. It was human. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Police, maybe ambulances. And then came the news on every TV and phone alert the next morning. A series of brutal nighttime attacks have left several injured. The suspect has been dubbed the night cannibal. Victims report a man biting them before fleeing into the dark. I turned off the screen, hand shaking. My stomach growled, and I knew deep down that I didn't need to wonder who the night cannibal was. I made the appointment out of desperation, not faith. You don't look up psychiatrists near me after waking with blood on your hands unless you're ready to hear something that might break you further. But I needed someone in a lab coat to tell me I wasn't becoming a monster. The clinic sat on the edge of town, all glass and polite lighting, the kind of place that smells like disinfectant. I filled out the intake form with shaking hands and almost wrote dietary issues under reason for visit. I crossed it out and scribbled nightmares, anxiety, possible hallucinations. Dr. Harris was younger than I expected. Mid-30s, calm voice, eyes that looked like they'd seen too many breakdowns to be surprised anymore. "So, you've been having episodes?" she asked, clicking her pen. "Let's call them that," I said. Less embarrassing than I might have attacked people while sleepwalking. She didn't flinch. "You said you woke up with blood on your hands?" "Yeah, not mine." I checked. She nodded slowly, jotting something down. "Have you had any changes in appetite or sleep?" I laughed, loud, harsh. "Doc, I'm hungry all the time. I could eat the table if it stopped moving long enough." Her eyebrows arched, but she smiled like someone taught to be kind to lost causes. "And sleep?" "Let's just say the Sandman's ghosted me." She asked about the mountains, the blizzard, the days trapped alone. I told her most of it, leaving out the parts that sounded impossible. I didn't mention the blue eyes or the voice in my head. I just said I'd gotten lost, starved, maybe eaten something that messed me up. "Starvation can trigger all sorts of effects," she said, nodding. "Hallucinations, metabolic shifts, even violent sleepwalking in extreme cases." "Hallucinations don't explain the blood on my hands," I said. Her pen hesitated. "You said you saw something, or someone." I sighed. "Not someone, something. It looked like a deer skull on legs, but bigger. It watched me. I stopped. The word sounded ridiculous out loud. "Never mind." Dr. Harris leaned forward, voice gentle. "You're not crazy. Trauma changes perception. Your brain's trying to make sense of danger." She handed me a sheet. "Let's run a few tests. Blood work, neurological scan. Rule out infection or deficiency before we assume anything psychological." I agreed, mostly to buy time. They drew blood, ran an MRI, made me stare at dots while they tracked my pupils. I cracked jokes through all of it. "You'll probably find caffeine and sarcasm." The nurse smiled weakly. She gave me some sleeping pills and I went home, swallowed several and slept the rest of the day and night. The next day, Dr. Harris called me back. Her voice had lost its calm. "Your results came in," she said. "Can you come back in person?" That's never a good sign. When I arrived, she looked nervous, which made me nervous. She turned her monitor toward me. "Your blood work, it's unusual. Elevated hemoglobin, hyperactive metabolic markers. Honestly, I've never seen numbers this high outside of medical fiction." "Meaning?" "Meaning your blood's carrying oxygen like an endurance athlete on something synthetic. Your brain scans show abnormal activity in the amygdala and hypothalamus, centers for fear, hunger, aggression, but not damage, more like enhancement." I forced a grin. "So what you're saying is, I'm evolving?" Her lips pressed thin. "You're changing, that much is clear. I'd like to admit you for observation, run more controlled tests." The word admit made my skin crawl. "No thanks. I've seen enough white walls for one lifetime." "This isn't safe to ignore. I'll take my chances." She sighed, rubbing her temple. "At least promise you'll call if things get worse." "Define worse?" She didn't laugh. Neither did I. On the drive home, the sun was setting, washing the world in copper. My reflection in the rear view looked wrong again, cheeks hollowed, eyes rimmed in faint blue light. I gripped the wheel tighter. Maybe the doctor was right. Maybe I was changing. But I had no intention of becoming the thing that started this. I just didn't know yet how close I already was. The psychiatrist's words wouldn't stop echoing in my head. "You're changing." She'd meant it clinically. I heard it like a verdict. That night I went home and stared at my reflection for a long time. My pupils looked wrong, too wide, like they hadn't gotten the memo about indoor lighting. My skin looked flushed, even though the room was cold. Every nerve in me felt like it was vibrating just under the surface. I needed control. I needed a line between me and whatever this was. So I went to the hardware store before it closed and bought every length of chain they had. The cashier gave me a look that was somewhere between curiosity and mild alarm. "Building something?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "a little peace of mind." The basement smelled of dust and motor oil. I bolted the chains to the support beam beside the old couch. Double anchor points, wrist height, reinforced. I had built plenty of camp setups in my life, but this was my first self-imposed prison. The irony wasn't lost on me. Before locking myself in that night, I made preparations. I taped a note to the wall. "If I get out, call the police. P.S. Don't open the door, whatever I say." Not that anyone lived nearby to read it. Still, it made me feel like I had a safety net, however imaginary. Then I sat on the couch, clicked the cuffs into place, and waited. The first hour was fine. My stomach growled, but it always did now. By midnight, the hunger had evolved from a dull ache into something alive. It twisted through me like a wire tightening. I could hear my pulse in my ears, could smell the faint traces of blood on my own skin. I laughed out loud just to prove I still could. "You picked the wrong guy to haunt, pal. I'm stubborn as sin." The sound bounced off the concrete and came back thinner, less human. Then came the pain. Sharp, sudden cramps that sent me doubling over. My muscles felt like they were being rewired, fibers pulling tight, bones creaking. I could hear every breath rasping out of me. I strained against the cuffs without meaning to. The chains clanged against the beam, and that metallic echo might have been the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. When it passed, I was drenched in sweat, panting. My body felt lighter, stronger. The cuffs that had fit snugly now bit into my wrists like they'd shrunk. I tugged again, and one of the bolts groaned in protest. I froze, terrified I might actually break free. That's when I smelled it, blood, not mine, fresh, sharp, close. The scent snaked down the basement stairs, thick enough to taste. My heart started hammering. I listened, every sense on high alert. The neighborhood was quiet, but the smell stayed. Sweet, impossible, inviting. I shut my eyes and pressed my head against the wall, whispering to myself, "Don't you dare." But the voice that whispered back wasn't mine. It was low, velvet, and ancient.
"The hunger always wins."
I jerked against the chains so hard the beam rattled. "Get out of my head." The laughter that followed wasn't sound. It was vibration rolling under my skin. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. When dawn finally scraped its way through the tiny basement window, I was still awake, trembling, my arms raw where the chains had rubbed them. The hunger had dulled, but not gone. It never went away. I unlocked myself and stumbled upstairs, hands shaking. In the kitchen, the fridge hummed softly. I opened it out of habit. Empty, except for a raw steak I didn't remember buying. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slammed the door shut hard enough to rattle the shelves. That day I didn't eat, didn't sleep either. I sat in front of my computer researching old legends, anything with the word Wendigo in it. The more I read, the less hope I had. And somewhere between the folklore and the horror, I found a single line that made my stomach twist. A man touched by the Wendigo's hunger may yet be saved, if he kills the one that cursed him before he kills another human and feasts on the flesh. I closed the laptop, pulse steady for the first time in days. It wasn't over, not yet. I spent the next 2 days buried in every digital rabbit hole the internet could offer, chasing folklore like it was a cure. I barely moved from my chair, surviving on tap water and the occasional bite of bread I didn't want. The hunger sat in my gut, quiet but coiled, waiting. Most of the stories said the same thing. A Wendigo begins as a man, a hunter lost to starvation, a soul that feeds on its own kind and becomes something else, skin stretched too tight, heart frozen, mind hollowed out by hunger until all it remembers is need. Every culture up north had a version. The Cree, the Algonquin, the Anishinaabe. All warned that once you'd killed and tasted human flesh, there was no return. The Wendigo's hunger wasn't just a curse. It was an infection of the spirit, a cold that started in the stomach and spread to the soul. But a few fragments, buried deep in academic papers and scanned pages of forgotten journals, told a different story. They hinted at a loophole. The hunger may be halted if the spirit that bestowed it is slain before the afflicted kills and consumes again. That single line blazed through me like fire. Before I killed again, before the thing inside me finished what it started. I rubbed my hands together. They felt warmer than they should have, veins pulsing faintly under the skin like tiny rivers of light. I could see details I shouldn't have been able to, pores, hairs, the twitch of each muscle. My hearing had sharpened too. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked 2 streets away, and I could count every echo. I muttered, "Guess the trade-off for turning into a monster is free upgrades." The laugh came out too loud, too sharp. It didn't sound like me anymore. I turned back to the screen, scrolling through image after image of old illustrations. Gaunt creatures with deer skulls for heads, ribs like cages, claws instead of fingers. Some were just stories, but some felt familiar. Then I found a scanned note from a 19th century missionary named Fletcher. His handwriting slanted across the page, ink faded with age. They are not beasts, but hollow men shaped by the hunger they surrender to. Fire may repel them, silver may bind them, but only their death can free the one who carries their mark. There it was again. Fire, silver, death. I knew what I had to do. I opened the old gear trunk I kept near the back door. The tools of my old life, rifle, revolver, knives, lantern, and the little hunting blade I'd bought years ago for skinning deer. I held the rifle up to the light. "Looks like it's just you and me, pal," I said. "One last camping trip." But before I left, I needed confirmation. If I was going to kill a legend, I wanted to understand the rules properly. I remembered stories of shamans, medicine men who treated this sort of thing like a disease of the spirit. It took me hours of calling every local number I could find, pretending I was a journalist, a historian, even a teacher writing a paper. Most laughed me off, but one quiet voice told me to come in person. "Bring nothing dead with you," the old man said over the line, "and don't come after sunset." The address he gave was a small reservation 2 hours north. I packed light, rifle, silver knife, some jerky for the road, though the smell made my stomach twist. When I arrived, the sun was sinking low. Smoke curled from a cabin built of rough pine logs. The man waiting outside was older than the trees, face carved with lines that looked like maps. He watched me approach and nodded once. "You've met it," he said without preamble. I swallowed hard. It met me. He studied my face for a long moment. "You've eaten, haven't you?" The shame hit like a punch. I didn't know what it was. I was starving. He sighed, heavy and tired. "That's how it begins." "But you haven't killed yet?" he asked, suddenly anxious. "No," I exclaimed. He relaxed. I asked him how to stop it, how to kill the thing that started this. He looked toward the darkening woods and said, "Fire and silver. Stabbing it with silver will paralyze it. Then you must cut off its head and burn the body before sunrise. But beware, Hunter, it knows you now. It wants you to come." "Good, because now I know it too," I said. For the first time since this began, I felt something new stirring beneath the hunger. Not fear, not despair, purpose. That night I didn't drive home. The shaman had given me tea that tasted like pine smoke and metal filings, told me it would quiet the hunger. It didn't. If anything, it made me more aware of it. Like realizing there's a ticking clock inside your chest you can't turn off. I parked by an empty rest stop off Highway 14 and tried to sleep in the cab of my truck. The moon was a pale coin over the tree line. I could hear every insect, every flake of frost forming on the windshield. Around midnight, I woke to a smell so strong it felt solid. Blood. I sat up fast. The road was empty, but the scent was close, sweet and hot, threading through the cold air. I opened the door and stepped out before I even realized what I was doing. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from something deeper. A gas station sat across the road, lights buzzing. A lone man in a parka was filling his tank, whistling softly. The scent came from him. My heartbeat slowed, not sped up. It felt good, too good. I could hear the rush of blood in his veins, steady and thick. My mouth watered. The hunger uncoiled like a cat stretching in sunlight. I gripped the edge of the truck door until my knuckles went white. "Don't," I whispered. "You're not that thing." The voice that answered wasn't mine.
You already are.
I squeezed my eyes shut. The smell was unbearable, every instinct screaming at me to move, to hunt. I could taste him just standing there. Then he turned, a friendly stranger's smile. "You okay, buddy?" That single human concern almost broke me. I wanted to answer, to warn him. But all that came out was a growl. Low, animal, wrong. His face went pale. He dropped the nozzle and stumbled back. I staggered away back into the woods behind the station. My breath tore in and out, sharp clouds against the freezing air. I slammed my fist into a tree, hard enough to crack bark. The pain grounded me just enough to speak. "No, no more. I'm ending this." The voice in my head purred.
You'll starve. You'll beg for it.
"Then I'll die hungry," I hissed. I knelt in the snow, clutching my head, the world spinning around me. I saw flashes of blue light, the outline of those antlers. Felt the pull of the blizzard again, that same suffocating cold wrapping around me like a promise. When it faded, I was alone, kneeling in a shallow print of my own making. My fingernails had carved deep furrows in the snow, and blood ran down my wrist. My blood. The scent made me gag. I stumbled back to the truck shaking, and poured half the gasoline canister I kept for emergencies over my arm just to kill the smell. The burn seared like acid, but it worked. The scent dulled. The hunger retreated, sulking. By dawn I was miles away, parked at a scenic overlook facing the mountains. The sun climbed slow, spilling gold across the peaks, and I whispered to it like a confession. "I'm going back. I'm finishing this." I mentally went through all the gear I had with me. My .308 rifle, revolver, the silver knife, fire axe, 1 can of gasoline, camping supplies. As I drove toward the tree line, the mountains rose ahead, jagged, cold, and waiting. The shaman's words echoed in my head. "It knows you now. It wants you to come." "Good," I muttered, gripping the wheel. "Saves me the trouble of an introduction." Behind me, the rising sun caught my reflection in the rear-view mirror. For just a heartbeat, my eyes glowed blue. I didn't blink. I just smiled. By the time I reached the reservation again, the sky had turned the color of old steel. The peaks in the distance were veiled in cloud, faint as smoke. I parked by the same cabin where the shaman had met me, though this time the fire outside was already burning, waiting. He stood beside it, wrapped in a wool blanket that looked older than both of us. The smoke from the fire curled into the windless air and vanished as though swallowed by something unseen. "I knew you'd be back," he said. "I almost wasn't," I admitted. "Almost lost control last night." He nodded once, unsurprised. "The closer you get to it, the stronger its voice. It wants you to join it." I stepped closer to the fire. "Then I'll make sure it's not lonely." He almost smiled at that. "Sit." I obeyed. The warmth felt different here, thicker, almost solid, like it carried a heartbeat. He took a pouch from his coat and emptied it into the flames. Dried herbs, bits of bone, something that hissed like oil. The fire burned green for a moment, then deepened to orange again. "What's that?" I asked. "Memory," he said. "Old prayers, from when our people still believed the world could listen." The smell rose sharp and bitter. It made my tongue ache. He crouched across from me and reached into the folds of his blanket, drawing out a knife. Not large but beautiful, its blade silver, its handle carved with curling lines that shimmered in the light. Symbols, maybe letters, older than the alphabet I knew. "Anasazi," he said. "They're symbols of silence. Strike with this, and the spirit that carries the hunger will freeze for a breath, only a breath. Then you cut its head off and burn it." I took the knife carefully. It was lighter than it looked, cold even near the fire. He studied me for a long time. "You are faster now, stronger. It gave you those gifts so you could feed, but its gifts can be turned against it. If your heart remembers who it was before the hunger, you can fight it. And if I forget, then you'll walk back into this fire, and we'll make sure you never rise again." He said it plainly, no threat, just duty. Somehow that comforted me. I pulled the rifle from my pack and began cleaning it, running a rag along the barrel. "You said it knows I'm coming." He nodded. "It's been waiting since you left. It has your scent. It has your thoughts." "Great," I muttered. "Makes for an efficient reunion." He ignored the joke. "It will tempt you again before the end, with promises, with hunger. The Wendigo has no soul to bargain with, only appetite." The fire popped, sending sparks into the dusk. The light caught his eyes, and I thought I saw pity there. "You will kill it, or it will finish turning you. Either way, by sunrise, the hunger will have an ending." I sheathed the silver knife. Sunrise works for me. I've always been more of a morning person anyway. The shaman gave a small, genuine smile. "I believe you were once a good man, Hunter. Be one again when you end it." He pressed a small leather pouch into my hand. "Ash and cedar. Scatter it when it burns. It keeps the spirit from finding another host." I thanked him and turned toward the trail that led back into the high ridges. The air felt colder now, the sky bleeding from gray to black. Somewhere beyond the timberline, the wind began to whisper again, not words this time, but rhythm. A slow, steady crunch, dot, crunch, dot, crunch, the sound I'd heard that first night. I started walking towards my truck. The last sliver of daylight slid behind the peaks, and the cold climbed my spine like a warning. The hunger stirred, and somewhere deep in the trees ahead, something stirred with it. The mountain road ahead was half buried, drifts reaching up to the bumper. I chained the tires, slung my rifle, and started on foot once the incline grew too steep. The cold didn't cut me anymore. Every breath came out as smoke that refused to leave, coiling back toward my face. Halfway up, I found my old campsite. What was left of it anyway? The tent had collapsed under the snow, the poles snapped. The ring of stones where I'd built fires was now a perfect circle of ice, smooth as glass. From the pack I laid out what I had: my .308 rifle with 6 rounds, revolver with hollow points, silver knife with Anasazi sigils, fire axe, a can of gasoline, and my last matchbook from the diner back in town. Everything else, the food, the sleeping gear, was ballast I didn't need. I wasn't planning on sleeping. I worked methodically, digging a shallow pit at the center of camp, lined it with wood, kindling, dry moss. I built it larger than a man should need, large enough for something that towered. Every strike of the shovel echoed strange and hollow, like the trees were listening. When I finished, I stood over the pile and poured gasoline until it bled into the snow. The fumes mixed with the smell of pine sap. It felt good. Clean. Then I waited. The mountains never do anything quickly. The wind started small, whispering through the pines, carrying faint flakes that drifted like ash. My breath stayed even, my hands steady. The silver knife felt alive in my grip, cold and humming faintly. Hours passed. I could feel it before I saw it, pressure, like the air thickened behind me. The hair on my arm stood straight. The fire pit hissed once, a tremor running through the wood, and then the voice.
"You came back."
It wasn't out loud. It was everywhere. "I told you I would," I said. "Figured we should finish dinner."
"You are strong,"
it said, the words sliding through my mind like breath on glass.
"Stronger than the others. You could feed forever."
I turned slowly, rifle raised. The forest behind me seemed to lean closer, trees warping into shapes that weren't trees at all. Between them, the Wendigo stepped into view. It was worse in the open. The antlers stretched wide enough to scrape the low branches. The deer skull gleamed pale as moonlight, its empty eyes burning with blue fire. Its chest rose and fell in jerks, ribs moving under skin too tight. And its hands, long, bony, blackened at the fingertips, hung like tools that had forgotten what mercy was. I leveled the rifle. "Let's end this, then." The creature tilted its skull.
"End this? You are part of this now. You carry my hunger."
"I carry something else, too." The first shot cracked the air, echoing down the valley like thunder. The Wendigo staggered, blue light flaring. The second shot spun it half around, its howl shaking the trees, rattling my teeth. The rifle jammed after the third round. I dropped it, drew the revolver, and fired twice. Each shot made the air colder. The last bullet punched through its shoulder. It stumbled but didn't fall. "Still hungry," I shouted. Come get your last meal. It lunged. The world turned into noise and movement, snow exploding under its feet, claws swiping wide. With blurring speed, I swung the axe up just in time to catch its arm, shearing through tendon. Black blood hissed where it hit the snow. The Wendigo shrieked, and my vision wavered. My knees buckled as its mind slammed into mine, a wave of hunger so strong it almost felt holy. For a heartbeat I saw through its eyes the endless woods, the blizzards that never ended, the cold that whispered feed or die. I almost pitied it. Then I remembered the people I had hurt, and God knows how many people it had devoured in its endless hunger, the same hunger I'd carried since that first bite. I raised the silver knife hand steady and whispered, "You picked the wrong camper." The Wendigo staggered back, its body shuddering as the wound from the silver knife smoked faintly in the frigid air. The blue fire in its eyes flared brighter, and for the first time I saw emotion there, shock, maybe even recognition.
You have learned much.
Its voice crawled through my skull, soft as frost. "Yeah," I said, circling the fire pit I'd built. "Turns out starving to death makes a good teacher." It moved slower now, limping slightly, but there was nothing human about its grace. Each step made no sound, the snow recoiling before its feet touched. It stopped just at the edge of the circle, looking down at the gasoline-soaked wood stacked neatly in the pit. The smell of fuel filled the clearing like a promise. I struck a match and held it up between us. "Come on, one step closer." It didn't move. The firelight caught its ribs through stretched flesh, making it look carved out of shadow and ice. The antlers framed its skull like a crown, and when it spoke again, the air trembled.
You could still join me. You are already halfway. The hunger lives in you now. It will outlast your fire, your bullets, your courage.
The match burned down to my fingertips, singeing skin. I dropped it into the pit. Flames leapt up in a sudden roar, orange turning blue at the base, licking the air between us. The Wendigo flinched, hissed, drew back. "Yeah," I said, flexing my burnt fingers. "You don't like fire. I figured that out the hard way." The creature's voice turned silk smooth.
You are dying already. Each breath you take feeds me. Every beat of your heart belongs to me. Why fight? You could have eternity, strength, warmth.
"Warmth?" I laughed, raw and hoarse. "You mean this?" I lifted my shirt, showing the faint blue veins glowing just beneath my skin. "That's not warmth, that's infection." The Wendigo tilted its head, the deer skull catching the firelight.
You misunderstand. You are not infected. You are becoming what you were meant to be. You survived because I chose you.
That last sentence hit like a hammer. I froze, matchlight flickering over my hands. "You chose me?" "You begged for it." Images slammed into my mind, me on my knees in the hollow, starving, praying to survive. My own voice whispering, "Anything, just let me live." It wasn't lying. I had made the deal without realizing it. I took a step back, dizzy. I didn't know.
Ignorance does not absolve you,
It said.
but I am merciful. Feed, and the pain will end. The hunger will turn to power. The cold will never touch you again.
My skin tingled, my heartbeat slowed, my stomach twisted with sudden longing. The scent of blood, my blood, its blood, all of it was intoxicating. I gritted my teeth. "You're right about one thing. I am hungry." Its burning eyes brightened. I raised the revolver. "Just not for what you're selling." The shot caught it in the chest. The sound shattered the stillness, echoing through the trees like thunder rolling downhill. The Wendigo screamed, if that's what you could call it. The air itself shook, the snow leaping from the ground in small explosions. It charged through the flame, catching fire as it came. I swung the axe upward, catching its shoulder, then the side of its neck. The heat scorched my face, smoke and gasoline blinding me. The creature slammed into me, claws raking across my arm. I fell backward into the snow, the world turning into spinning light and flame. My ribs screamed. The silver knife flew from my hand, landing near the pit. The Wendigo loomed over me, half aflame, its antlers crackling, its skull wreathed in smoke. It leaned close, the heat from its burning body filling the air with the stench of roasted meat.
When the fire dies, the hunger will return. You cannot escape what you are.
I spat blood and whispered, "Watch me." With my uninjured arm, I lunged for the silver knife. My fingers brushed the hilt, Too far. The Wendigo grabbed my shoulder, forcing me down. The cold poured off it like water, eating through the warmth I'd built. My breath turned to fog. My heartbeat slowed. The edges of my vision blurred, dark creeping inwards. For a moment I saw nothing but its blue eyes filling the world. Then I remembered the shaman's words. It will tempt you. I let my body go limp. I stopped fighting, let it think I'd surrendered. The creature leaned closer, skull inches from my face. That's when I whispered, "Dinner's not over yet." And with the last of my strength, I rolled, dragging us both toward the waiting fire. The world exploded into color and fire. The Wendigo and I hit the ground together, snow billowing around us in white clouds. The flames from the pit clawed upward, greedily swallowing air, turning the snow beneath it to black mud. It shrieked, no words now, just rage, and swung a burning arm toward me. The claws scraped my chest, cutting through fabric and skin. Pain flashed bright and clean, but it kept me human. I grabbed its wrist with both hands and drove my knee up into its ribs. The impact cracked like gunfire. Its body was lighter than I expected, hollow, brittle, but it moved with impossible speed, twisting free, knocking me flat again. We rolled, half on fire, half frozen. Every time my fingers brushed its skin, cold surged through me, numbing everything it touched. I could feel the hunger in that cold, the same gnawing presence that had lived in my stomach for weeks. It wanted me back. I fought harder. My hand found the silver knife buried in the snow. I swung wildly and buried the blade in its side. The Wendigo screamed, smoke pouring from the wound like breath from a furnace. Its blue eyes flickered, dimmed, then blazed again.
You cannot stop what you are becoming.
"Watch me," I roared, pulling the blade free. It lunged again, faster than thought, and we collided near the edge of the fire pit. The ground cracked beneath us, heat searing my face. The smell was unbearable. Burning fur, gasoline, something ancient cooking in its own hatred. The Wendigo's claws pinned me by the shoulders. It leaned down, close enough that I could see the faint movement of shadow inside its skull, something writhing behind bone. Its breath was a storm of ice.
You begged for life,
it whispered.
I am hunger, I am mercy, I am survival, you are mine.
I stopped fighting for a second. My body sagged, exhausted. Maybe it was right. Maybe this was always how it would end. Becoming the very thing I'd feared. Maybe I'd earned it. The claws dug deeper, cold fire racing through my veins. My vision darkened.
Feed,
it whispered.
And never starve again.
I almost said yes. But then somewhere in the darkness I saw the shaman's face, heard his voice. If your heart remembers who it was before the hunger, you can fight. I forced a breath, every muscle screaming. Get out of my head, I rasped. With everything left in me, I rammed the silver knife up beneath its ribcage. The blade sank deep. The Wendigo convulsed, the blue light in its eyes sputtering. I twisted the knife, and the thing made a sound that wasn't a scream so much as the world itself cracking open. It staggered back, clutching at the blade buried in its chest. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the fire axe from the snow, and faced it one last time. The flames cast it in orange and black. Its antlers were melting, dripping tar. Its voice came again, weaker but still inside my mind.
End this hunger, and you end yourself.
Good, I said, stepping forward. I'm tired of being hungry. It charged. I swung the axe. The blade met the base of its neck with a sound like thunder. The Wendigo's head jerked sideways, bone splintering. But it didn't fall. It lashed out, knocking me backward. The knife in its chest pulsed with white light, veins of fire crawling through its skin. Come on, I shouted. Let's finish this. It lunged again. I swung once more, clean and high. Eat this. The axe split bone. The deer skull toppled into the snow with a hiss, the blue fire fading to gray. The body stood upright for one impossible moment, then collapsed into the fire pit, crashing through the burning logs. Flames roared higher, devouring it. Black smoke spiraled upward, twisting against the stars. The sound that followed wasn't a scream. It was a sigh, a long release, like the mountain exhaling after holding its breath too long. I hurriedly poured the pouch containing the ash given by the shaman over the fire. The fire roared high again in a blue flames, and I heard a dying, inhuman screech which faded with the wind. The hunger inside me broke. I fell to my knees, trembling. The fire's warmth hit my face, clean and pure. For the first time in weeks, I felt cold again. The honest kind, the kind that makes you reach for a blanket, not blood. The knife lay in the snow beside me, still glowing faintly. I picked it up, breathing hard. The blade was warm, alive. Behind me, dawn was coming, but I didn't move yet. I just knelt there, watching the flames consume the monster, and whispered to the empty woods, "It's over." The woods for once didn't argue. The fire burned long after sunrise, turning the clearing into a blackened bowl rimmed with snow. I sat beside it, half numb, half awake, every muscle trembling from exhaustion. The axe lay across my knees, streaked with soot. The silver knife, its glow now dim, rested at my side like a faithful companion that had finally done its duty. The Wendigo's body was gone, or close enough, nothing left but cinders and bone dust that hissed whenever the wind shifted. The smell of gasoline and scorched meat clung to everything, even the inside of my lungs. But the cold in the air was honest again, just mountain cold, not the creeping, unnatural chill I'd been living with. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the hunger. Not the dark, twisting thing that had gnawed behind my ribs. I felt empty, yes, but clean, human. The shaman's words came back to me. By sunrise, the hunger will have an ending. He was right. When I finally stood, my knees cracked like brittle wood. The strength that had carried me this far was fading. My hands shook, no longer steady as iron. The mountain took back what it had loaned me, and I was glad to return it. I took one last look at the fire pit, the place where I'd burned a monster and maybe the worst part of myself, and said softly, "Dinner's over." The words came out like smoke, carried off by the morning wind. Then I turned and started down the slope. The trek back was slow, harder than I remembered. The snow gave under my boots, and the cold bit deep this time. I didn't mind. It felt like punishment and healing all at once. Every breath I took steamed white in the air, proof that I was no longer something inhuman. By the time I reached the tree line, the sun was high, the world bright and blinding. I followed the old trail past the stream, past the hollow where I'd eaten the cursed meat, past every scar the mountain had given me. When I reached my truck, I leaned against the hood and laughed. It wasn't relief exactly, it was disbelief. Somehow I'd lived through something I couldn't have imagined 2 months ago. I caught my reflection in the side mirror. My face was thinner, older. The eyes that looked back were brown again, though tired. There was no faint blue glow, no predator hiding behind the pupils. Just me. I drove down the mountain without looking back. Back in town, I went straight to the diner, the same one where I'd scared my friends half to death with my appetite. I sat at the counter, ordered black coffee and a plate of pancakes, and waited for the hunger to test me. It didn't. The coffee was bitter and wonderful. The pancakes tasted like sunlight and sugar. The waitress smiled when she brought the check. "You look better," she said. "Did the mountains treat you right this time?" I smiled back. We came to an understanding. Outside, the world felt ordinary again. Cars passed, birds sang, people laughed. I walked to my truck, slid behind the wheel, and watched the morning light spill over the windshield. For a brief moment, I thought it was done. Then as I reached to start the engine, my hand brushed the feather in my jacket pocket, the one the shaman had given me. For luck, it was warm, too warm. I pulled it out. The tip, once white and gray, was now streaked faintly with blue. A chill swept through me, not the Wendigo's cold, but something subtler, quieter. Deep inside, somewhere below the calm, I felt a single twitch, a flicker, hunger, small, distant, but there. I stared at the feather, then at the road ahead. Maybe the curse wasn't done with me yet. I smiled faintly, started the truck, and said to no one in particular, "Guess I'll keep the fire going, just in case." The engine rumbled to life. The mountains loomed behind me in the rearview mirror, watching, silent. And somewhere in the wind that followed me home, I swore I heard the faintest crunch of snow. I'm Dr. Midnight. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.